I wouldn't say, no, I'm not worried about it. And I wouldn't say that their studies are worth nothing. No, not at all. I would certainly give it my best of attention. But I'm not sure it is that 20-30% that you're talking about. FMCG companies do have metrics which we need to take seriously because it indicates quick buying of durable goods. But equally, it is not correct to say that rural distress is continuing, because I think there's a lot of shift in the way in which rural economy is now going through. There's a lot of shift because money is going in the name of one or the other scheme to every family in the rural area. I would dare say this, that there is no family left without getting at least one or the other scheme of the government. So those who deserve it. Rural economy is also looking at a changing paradigm in agriculture. A lot of commercial crops are coming in. The linkages through the national agricultural market. Even today there are media reports about how between different markets in different regions, better rate is actualized. So farmers are now seeing potential for them to move to different crops. The emphasis given to the shree and the millets, the emphasis given to horticulture is finding newer markets within their locality. The urban centers close by are benefiting by the horticulture reaching them locally and in reasonable price. So really it's no longer wheat and rice economy. It is a lot more of horticulture, fisheries, livestock is gaining a lot of attention, also supported by the policy of the government. SHGs which are now into value addition in food, and also with mechanization of agriculture, which is bringing the monotony down, not throwing people out. Themselves are becoming centers for business. Agriculture, let's say a farmer's son or daughter sets up a business for lending, leasing and hiring out equipments. Companies are coming into the villages saying, not all of them want tractors, but hoes, trying to de-weed. Every such small agricultural equipment is now finding traction, for which their sons and daughters themselves are setting up businesses. So there's a lot happening in rural areas.
Finance Minister, you gave a very interesting definition of secularism, and you linked it to saturation of the availability of all government schemes. Expand on that. Is that now the new definition that the Modi government is pushing out for secularism, because it's a word that has drawn a lot of debate in the past?
That's right. And not just in 24 elections, even in 2019, by which time Ujjwala had reached good dimensions. You had people belonging to different communities. Particularly when you talk of gas cylinders, only women come forward to talk about it. Men think it doesn't matter to them, because ultimately the food has reached the table. How does it matter whether it is being cooked in gas or anything else? So men tend to talk less about it. Women come out to say, yes, I'm benefiting with the gas cylinder. People who came out to say that Ujjwala has helped me to bring a clean air in my kitchen and I'm more efficient in getting my food done, belong to all communities. Even at that time, it was observed by media, observed by political observers, that Ujjwala scheme's implementation has proven that every eligible person gets it, not just the first charge going to one particular section, as it was narrated once earlier by a Prime Minister. So that litmus test of secularism actually in action has been felt even in 2019, now it's felt even more. So if secularism has to be practiced, you don't need to pander to religious beliefs. If you're able to across the board give everybody everything, you are indifferent to the person's faith or religion, but making sure he or she is as good as the other next door. That's action, secularism in action.
Ma'am, let's spend a moment on household savings, which have been one of the pillars of the Indian economy in years gone by. And now household savings are said to be at a 5-decadal low. at 5.1%. How are you looking at the aspect of Indian households seeming to save much lesser than they have in past decades? And is that something that you're okay with? Is that something that concerns you?
That's not the conclusion you can arrive at.
How
Indian
do you
households saving lesser than before? No, because as much as you talk about small savings and quote numbers on it, the only option that small saving or people in middle classes had for saving their money and with some confidence was to put it in, let's say, post office savings account, which continues, which is good enough, which can continue any longer. But you're also noticing since 2020 that because of greater transparency and greater availability of information, people are able to see which are those performing companies. They're not even going through the route of mutual funds to understand how stock market performs. Small saving in the name of retail funding is coming into the stock markets and coming through demat accounts which are unique. So I'm not talking about the same person doing 5 types of investments. New demat accounts, unique demat accounts tell you probably many things which went to post offices are coming now into the market. So people are finding newer avenues to save and probably better returns are accrued in those routes.
Since we are speaking about the markets, the stock market regulator recently put out a word of caution with regard to a lot of the trades that are happening in trading in the derivatives segment, in F&O. Do you share that note of concern with regard to the nature of how people are trading in the markets?
That was much higher than what it is now, I would think, my concern that is. Much higher earlier than it is now because there's a lot of awareness being built by regulators to say that derivatives and dealing in F&O, as you said, can involve high risk. And many people burnt their fingers by starting to operate there. Young people who were the first time entrants also burnt their fingers. So there was a lot of discussion about it in one of our FSDC meetings. Regulators are now building a lot of awareness, and I would think that caution has come into play now.
Finance Minister, how are you've been chiding India Inc. to go out and invest, to find the strength of Hanuman and to invest in the India story, and for various reasons, the kind of secular investment cycle that you were hoping for hasn't really kickstarted. You can see some green shoots in some sectors, but it's not an overall investment cycle. How are you viewing, because we were together at the Rashtrapati Bhavan and you were telling a member of India Inc. to go out and invest even further. So how are you looking at India Inc. in several sectors still being in wait and watch mode, assessing but not committing fully to invest at this moment? Is that now beginning to get a little frustrating for you? How are you looking at investment appetite and actual investments apart from just the talk?
But I would equally say that in those sunrise sectors for which we've announced PLI schemes and so on, you find private investment coming in significant numbers. So I really cannot say now, as I said earlier, that, hey, you are Hanuman, you start flying. It is happening now, and I would think they are very clear in their heads that their investments now will probably go through the newer sectors. And they may want to build capacities, add capacities to the existing areas of activity, but many of them are now looking at prospects in the newer areas. So it is happening, but happening much more in the newer sunrise sectors.
Finance Minister, two key instruments of the government which have focused on getting new manufacturing and private investment, the point that was just made. One of those schemes of 2019, the end date is 31st March 2024, the concessional 15% rate for new manufacturing companies. Along with that, you've given a host of PLI schemes. Two parts to the question. One, do you see the need for continuing with that lower 15% rate, eventually perhaps in the full budget? And second, does PLI scheme need to expand, or at some point of time the government will say, we supported you as much as we could, now go on and do it on your own?
The answer to your second question is not, we've done it for a few years, so stop it now. It's more to ensure that India gets that lead in those sectors, in the sunrise areas. So I wouldn't time it by saying, I've done it for 2 years, shut shop now. That will not be my approach. My approach would be, is it really getting rooted in India? Is it sustainable? And are these industries really, taking off? So those will be my measure before I take a call on that. So I wouldn't rush to say I've done it for 2 years. The other is about the reduced tax rates. As I said for many other things, this interim budget was not the time for me to take a call on that. So I've not taken a call.
One of the critiques we've heard from the opposition finance minister is that when it comes to social sectors, the percentage of government outlays on education, on health, has come down as a percentage of our GDP in the years that this government has been on power. They level the accusation that while you're very focused on public infrastructure, that the amount of money that should be set aside for education and for healthcare isn't adequate, and even the outlays that are being made are not being fully spent. We're actually spending lesser than we provisioned for. How do you look at this?
On the outlays not getting spent, I may not be the best person to answer. I'll be concerned as to why the outlays are not getting spent. But it will be the departments, and in particularly health and education, states also have a role. It is a concurrent list of items that we're talking about when we talk about education and health. So it will depend on how much absorption happens in the states, how much the department is able to push, and so on. So those factors are totally out of my realm. But I can understand where they are, and probably a longer discussion can happen only on those two issues. It's also not right to measure expenditure on education and health as being adequate or not adequate. It can never be adequate. I'll concede that. Any amount that I put for education will still think, you'll think, I'll think, anybody will feel more can be added. And yes, more can be added. There cannot be a second thought on that. But the fact remains, as I said also for one question earlier somewhere else about capital expenditure, this time being not 30% in increase, only 11% increase. There's after all an element which is called absorption capacity. You can put ton loads of money somewhere, and in the capex, our condition was you use it within 12 months. I'll give you next year, but use what I've given you now fully this year. The absorption capacity element makes many of them who genuinely want to spend it, after a point not able to throttle it down within 12 months. They would need 13th, 14th, 15th month also. But I'm sorry, within 12 months it hasn't happened fully. So is the case with education and health. You may want to put any number into the outlay, but eventually, unless there's a properly fitted hospital, you're not going to be able to give additional training to the staff and spend money on that. Unless you have more medical seats available, you're not going to have enough doctors coming into the hospitals. Unless, again, it is spread all over the country. That's why at one point in time, I remember during my Atmanirbhar announcements, we said no longer are we looking at district level hospital, now it has to go to the block level. So there are levels and levels to which we need to now pad with more efforts and resources. So it's not going to happen within 1 year. Suppose I say I'm giving more now this year of the GDP. Are they in a position to absorb? The first layer is being set, second, third, and so on. I can't top at the fifth level when these have not been done.
Finance Minister, since we are speaking about allocations, explain the philosophy on the defense allocation. You've been defense minister, you've been commerce minister, and defense still above 6 lakh crore, the highest allocation. But some people say it's still 4.72% year-on-year growth. Earlier than that, in the previous financial year, there was a substantial increase. What's the philosophy behind the defense budget allocation?
First of all, defense and their procurement. You know it. Coming from a defense background, your friend Rahul will know it.
We share that background.
Yes. The long-term perspective planning that the defense has is really long time, and they go on fitting every year towards achieving that long-term goal. And for each year, it's not a proportionate allocation towards that long term. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less. sometimes it's just about all right, and so on. So it is the end goal that your long-term perspective plan, which has to be achieved, and in the process the allocations keep going up and down. In order that we get a complete picture of how money has got to be allocated for defense, is where the division happens. Pensions and salaries, the revenue, is one account. We don't
still
include
about
that.
52% of the
Yeah,
entire.
we don't include that. It may be 52% of the total defense budget. No, that's
committed.
That's a committed one, and we sincerely believe it should be where it has got to be. And after that is when you're looking at replenishing the existing lifespan of a particular vector, lifespan of a particular long-term asset, and then looking at just the components and so on. And then within that you're looking at how much is Army, how much is Navy, how much is Air Force, how much is Coast Guard. So it is not as if we blindly give one chunk of amount and say, sorry, that's the end of the story, you can do. Now what we've placed emphasis in this vote on account is to make innovation-driven procurement and manufacturing within India for Atmanirbhar defense. So you're driving money towards greater innovation within the country, that you're able to produce those equipments which are critical for you within India. For that I've made a separate allocation. So it is now a lot more calibrated to the needs of each one of them. It's not blanket give money, do what you want.
One of the big developments in the international money markets this year will be when JP Morgan includes Indian government bonds in the government bond
From
index for emerging markets from June. We've seen that you've reduced the fiscal deficit from the projected 5.9 to 5.8 now, hoping to bring this down to 5.1. How important is it for you to send a message to international rating agencies to improve India's credit rating at this moment? And how are you looking at this inclusion and all the billions of dollars that could flow into India after this?
See, there are two different things. Going into JP Morgan's listing is one thing. You are going to get money which is going to be less costly, and it'll be almost a default setup that it will keep coming once it is in the list and so on. That's one side. Yes, it will enable that process from June, let us say. But the other is about the credit rating agencies. Am I bringing down the fiscal deficit from 5.9, where it was expected to be, to 5.8 because I want a better perspective shared with the fiscal? No. It can be so. It can be a collateral. But I'm more aiming at getting India's fisc a lot more primed up, a lot more toned up, so that it doesn't carry too much of flap, that you're not able to at any point in time take that kind of a decision making or give commitments to better perform. So discipline in fiscal management is something which Prime Minister Modi takes very seriously. Even as a Chief Minister, he's had a record showing how he managed economy, finances within Gujarat.
But some of the states aren't following this kind of an approach. How concerned are you by the kind of public indebtedness we're seeing in some of the opposition?
It is concerning, and we talk to them. We try to sort of help them out to rearrange their fiscal. But ultimately it is the state's responsibility. We can only be the good counsel. We can't do anything more beyond that. But of course, ultimately under Constitution's Article 293, we are going to have to take the final call and responsibility on that. But that is a very delicate play, because we can't encroach into the state's decision making.
Finance Minister, soon after the budget, Moody's came out and taking this point forward about the rating outlook, and it said India's debt to GDP still remains high, despite the fact that you projected a decline 58.1% to 57.2% in FY25. Are rating agencies missing the point about the kind of fiscal transformation that the Modi government has been trying for the last 10 years?
It's good that you're saying it, and I've not said it, but that's the truth. Look at the borrowing, debt to GDP number for developed economies. They are well beyond 200s and 300s, well over 100 any case. Their credit rating doesn't get affected by the debt to GDP. So when mine is well below 100, at 80 let us say, But if it matters to the rating agencies that my debt to GDP is not above 100, I have no answers to give. It is not above 100.
Okay.
Ma'am, let's speak for a moment about disinvestment. You know, you've got some public sector unit companies which are at different stages of disinvestment. There is no ambitious target for disinvestment. There seems to be a change in thinking. So if you can explain that, and if and when you do come back to power, how important is strategic disinvestment as one of the missions for the Modi government and for you personally as finance minister? How committed are we still to trying to get government out of companies which the government really ought not to be running?
I'll start with the fact that I've stated it as a matter of policy. Went through the parliament, got approved and came out, 21-22 budget. That we do believe that all sectors should be open for private participation. No sector should be reserved for public sector only. And even if public sector is present in those core strategically important sectors, they will be minimal presence. I believe in it, Prime Minister Modi believes in it, it is the policy approved by the Parliament of India. Now therefore, I will have to consolidate in those sectors public sector presence, or I will, where I can't amalgamate or bring together or scale up, I will have to get out of some of them, for which the approval is obtained. I will have to do it. But equally, before I do it, during the time I'm waiting to do it, I will have to pay attention to the valuation of that company. I can't allow it to languish, and I can't allow it to continue to languish till before I throw them out or till before I get out of them. And when I want to get out of them, if I don't allow them to flourish in the meanwhile, the valuation that I obtain from the market is going to be trivial, if anything at all. So we have, for one, I want to be sure to tell the people of India, even if I've taken a call to disinvest a company completely, I'm attending to keep it in its prime condition now. And that is why you find the public sector companies in the stock market now performing much better and giving better dividends to all the shareholders. We can be some of it, and others are also taking the dividend from it. The other way of also looking at if disinvestment is happening is when we have come down in the level of holding that I have, further letting it into the market so that retail investors would come in. So the level to which I hold my shares in a public sector company also is something which you have to observe, because I'm slowly coming down in terms of the level to which I'm holding shares in these.
My question, ma'am, was about, as far as a core tenet of belief is concerned, how important is strategic disinvestment for you personally and for this government at this moment?
That's a policy.
The manner in, because we saw Air India happen quite seamlessly and you were able to get it out, but we aren't really seeing the same sense of pace and urgency when it comes to some of the other disinvestment projects that are currently in the pipeline, and I'm kind of wondering when you see them
I'm glad to hear this from you, Rahul. Before Air India, I was pilloried. When is it happening? When is it happening? Every time I met with a journalist friend, this would be the question. And at that time, it looked as if I'm sitting over it over a century. I'm glad to hear that now. No, as I said, it will happen. Our commitments will be fulfilled. And the core belief that you keep asking me about, that is why I went back to tell you that it is this government which went to the parliament to say disinvestment is what we believe in, because other than the core sectors, there's no way in which we need to be present as government. And in the core sectors, it is because of strategic interest. Telecom, unless I'm there, I won't be able to cover my first villages, which are now called vibrant villages. Private sector wouldn't go there. But how would I give them connectivity? I need to be there. Railways, I need to be there. Like that, our belief is to have minimal presence.
FM, just one quick follow-up on that. Is the market and other analysts missing the point that the dividends that come to you from central public sector undertakings, or for the matter RBI, which has helped contain the fiscal deficit in this budget's calculation as well, that is also in some ways revenue from the assets that have been built by the
I'm sure
exchequer.
the market know it. It is you journalists who want to go asking me this question.
Okay,
Markets enjoy it.
I'll come to another point, and this is to do with the North-South narrative that keeps happening. Two questions there, and just to add data here, the tax devolution in FY24, ma'am, that you announced, and we have seen that rose 16%. Central transfers are equally high at 15%. Yet there is this North-South narrative, and some voices from the South seem to suggest that the South is getting a raw deal, it contributes more to tax collections, and the North takes it away. How would you respond to that?
It's entirely politically motivated, not backed by facts or data, and above all, very divisionary and encourages secessionist elements. It is being done deliberately is my allegation. I charge them with that. They're doing it deliberately. If that is the case that we want to talk about, look at the investments that are going to the South, not private, governments. Why does the government of India invest then? It is because country as a whole will have to leverage the strengths that exist in the country. From one area, one strength, minerals, material, all of them come. Do we then allow that area to say, without me giving you coal, without me giving you iron ore, nothing will move. So give me the entire earning. Is that the way we look at it? Then, if that is the way we have to look at, regions which give higher revenue within a developed state, which says I contribute so much, Maharashtra contributes a lot more. Can it say that give me that much? One. Second, even within Karnataka, where the Honorable Deputy Chief Minister's brother has said, look, we are not getting as much as we are giving, so it might mean that we will have to form a separate country out of South India. I'd like to ask him, Bengaluru contributes to Karnataka's income much disproportionately higher. Now, if all citizens of Bengaluru say, look, we want to be a separate country, man, be damned with your Kalyana Karnataka, be damned with your Chitradurga. What will the government say there, which is now in power, which is Congress government? The same can be for Mumbai. In Maharashtra, Mumbai can say, sorry, it's all my money, huh? Mumbai becomes a separate country, you go Vidarbha, be your own, Marathwada, be your own. Are we okay with that kind of language? Are we okay with that kind of a thought somewhere in the back of our minds? It's utterly irresponsible. And above all, I think it's done with a purpose to bring in that element of doubt in the minds of people who live in these regions, to say, oh, probably the government is cheating us, it's not giving us our due. Are you an elected responsible leader sitting in the Lok Sabha, and there are a few others like that, believing in the Constitution of India, are you speaking responsibly? Is this the narrative you want to put forth in the public? And is it true narrative? If it is true, I can then say, yeah, you're speaking the truth, we'll have to look into it. Is this the truth? Where does it lead us to? Utterly irresponsible, but I think this is the trend with which the Congress party is growing. In the last 10 to 20 years, we are seeing repetition of the Tukade sympathies within the Congress. They went and stood in JNU with that gang which wanted to break India. They are now speaking this language from the South. They're supporting parties which speak secessionist language, the DMK for instance. They support them in Tamil Nadu. They speak that language. So what is this? Are we here by the Constitution? Or are we different elements of Break India?
Ma'am, there's been some conversation about senior ministers in the Modi cabinet fighting a Lok Sabha election. While of course that's something the party will decide. Would you like to put your hand up and say, give me a seat somewhere in Tamil Nadu or wherever it is that you prefer? Which state would you prefer to fight from? Probably Tamil Nadu in my understanding. And would you like to do it? Would you relish the prospect of getting out of North Block, fighting a Lok Sabha election?
In a party like BJP, it's not the person who relishes to do A, B, C. It is the party which says, okay, now you do this, and you may also want to relish it. And we follow it.
But would you relish that challenge? Moving from
Depends
Rajya
on
Sabha
what
to
the party says, right?
Okay. Now, ma'am, there was an interview that I did with Professor Raghuram Rajan at Davos, and I've been wanting to ask you this question since. His larger point was that the Modi government at this moment makes it seem as if we're on a 7% growth path and that this is relative to what's happening in the world very good. He says, given our stage of economic evolution, we should really be aiming for 9-10%. He chided me to ask government when I got a chance that, this is actually our current growth prospects and forecasts are 2 or 3% lesser than what you said while you were in opposition. And his charge is that just because we can't find the ways of growing at 9 to 10%, the government is now making it seem as if 7% is the best that can be done. Look at China at a similar stage of its evolution cycle. Look at the speed at which they were growing. If India does intend to become a Viksit country, we need to be growing at 9-10%. How would you respond to Raghuram Rajan?
I would want to ask you, should I respond to him as Raghuram Rajan, the economist, or Raghuram Rajan, the politician? The answer will depend on it.
Jo aapko theek lage.
No, I want to say this first. That's an answer that I'm giving you. Because Raghuram Rajan also had told us that we shouldn't invest any more in manufacturing, concentrate on services. But when he wants to talk on China, he would compare. China has always invested hugely in manufacturing. Now, I'm not imitating China. We'll have to find ways in which our own strengths can be further leveraged. So, that is one advice earlier. So, I find it difficult to take Raghuram Rajan's advice also because he was here holding a very responsible position as Governor of the Reserve Bank of India. The banks went through torment. A regulator looked the other way when phone calls were going to the banks and banks were yielding to the phone calls. The regulator didn't tell them, you will yield only to the banking norms and not to phone calls. So Raghuram Rajan, make up your mind when you speak to the government and nudging the media to go ask the government questions. Say first of all, look, I'm now wearing my economist hat and sometimes I'm wearing my political hat. That might be easy for us to address.
Finance Minister, many decades ago, and I grew up and millions of Indians grew up with the Roti Kapda Makan slogan. And in the last 10 years of Modinomics, Roti through the free food scheme for 800 million plus people, and now this budget announcing more expansion as far as housing is concerned, also a new scheme for middle class housing, hopefully to address people who are on rent. The kapda is missing, or should we look forward for another word instead of kapda in the Roti Kapda Makan phrase?
No, kapda is not missing. Kapda is something which the family can choose to do if they are otherwise benefited in terms of the basic necessities. So it's not as if we are going to take care of food but not clothes. No, if that individual and his family is empowered enough, they'll take a call on how they want to spend their money. Instead of, I wouldn't want to quote Mao, but wasn't it Mao who said, look, no good helping him to fish today, giving a fish in his hand. Give him the skills to fish, he will be able to. We are aiming at provide the basic facility, then give him access to different opportunities. He wants to do his own business. Don't stifle him by saying, get me a collateral, then I'll lend you. No collateral, I'll lend you, do your business. Similarly, if they are in villages, wanting more technology into the fields, we are giving the drones, we are training them, so go do it. Simultaneously looking at the gender parity and so on. So, aim of this government is to empower the person to make his own decision.
So, is it Roti Kapda finance? Because this budget has also announced a long-term scheme for financing.
Financing has already happened. It's continuing to happen. Mudra, Swanidhi are all financing. So that will continue also. We will enable people who have aspirations to become entrepreneurs to get assistance from the banks.
Now we're coming towards the end of this interview. You've now presented 6 budgets. I want your sense of how you see your evolution as finance minister from year 1 to year 6. Everybody has their own take, and there's so many pink papers writing constantly about every move you make. But when you look at the mirror and reflect, how do you think you've evolved as an economist, as a finance minister, as an individual, as a politician over these 6 years?
Gosh, that's very many. I can't answer all of them
Give
at
us
one
your
go.
sense.
Well, it's been a challenge and also an opportunity to work in such an environment. And it's not just saying it, I honestly do feel very much from the bottom of my heart to have a leader in the name of Prime Minister Modi and work with him. I've worked in corporate environments earlier. The level of professionalism, the level of tasking an individual and making sure that performance is the only criteria. Professionalism in work and making sure that till the last minute, if guidance and hand-holding is required, it is provided. Objective being, we need to deliver. We need to deliver. So that sense of working in a team with the guidance of the right kind of, assistance and not patronage is immensely satisfying.
Raksha Mantralaya or with Mantralaya, if you had to pick?
Both were great.
And there was commerce as well.
And commerce as well. I've been very fortunate in that my party and my Prime Minister have given me opportunities to serve in each one of these responsibilities.
This has been a broad-ranging interview for your responses and for your time and for your fiscal discipline in an election cycle, which is as rare can be, and that's something that's now being looked at internationally. Finance Minister, thank you so much for speaking to India Today and Business Today Television.
Thank you very much.
Appreciate it. Let's see if you're back in July. You've almost indicated that I'll be back in July.
This government will be back. Who will be where? I cannot. That's not my. It's much beyond my
pay grade. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Appreciate
All right.
this. Thank you.
Namaskar.
Darwin Platform Group of Companies is one of the fastest growing diversified Indian conglomerates with global footprints. It is setting up offices globally and tying up with companies across the globe from multiple sectors. The company has ventured into real estate and construction, stockbroking and finance, arms and ammunition, mining, airlines and many other sectors. In today's rapidly evolving business environment, when risk is omnipresent, managing risks is no longer just about ticking a few boxes. Businesses need to maintain a panoramic view of risks to stay ahead of the curve. Join us to explore how organizations can rethink risk to unlock new possibilities and become fit for future. At PwC presents De-Risking the Future in collaboration with Business Today. Celebrate 32 years of leadership in business news with Business Today. From the groundbreaking AI cover of Sundar Pichai to PM Modi's exclusive on G20, we redefine headlines. Now our 32nd anniversary issue explores India 2029, the 5-year agenda with industry titans sharing exclusive insights. So, just BT it for unparalleled perspectives. Business Today. 32 years of leadership, innovation and business brilliance. Subscribe now.
Hello and welcome. You're watching Business Today Television. I'm Sakshi Batra, and on this special edition, our focus is on the Q3 earnings. The company on our radar today is